In this recording, we're going to continue our discussion of using multiple worksheets to get stuff done, but in this time, we're going to take a look at how to create 3D formulas. Formulas that reference cells in other worksheets. To do that, I'm going to use the Unit 4 Sample 2 file. I've already opened that, so I'm going to expand mine. Again, it's in your data files for the recordings. And what I've done here is taken the liberty of filling in a bunch of data. It's just a bunch of stuff I made up. Also added a chart to each sheet. Otherwise, this is pretty much the same as we left it at the end of the first recording. I'm going to save this so that I don't overwrite it. In my Unit 4 folder, and I'm going to call it Budget 2013. And now what I want to do is create some calculations that use data in here to calculate some statistics for me. To do that, I'm going to create what I call a summary sheet. The book does the same kind of thing. They often put the summary sheet at the first position. It can go at the end. I wouldn't normally put it in the middle, but the summary sheet can go anywhere. I want the summary sheet to go at the beginning. So what I'm going to do is use a different technique to create a worksheet that looks very similar, identical to this as a matter of fact, and then modify it for my summary. I could create a sheet, do some grouping, enter some more data, but it's a little late for that because all these sheets are already done. So another way to create a sheet that looks just like this one is to create a summary, is to create a sheet by copying. Two ways to copy sheets. I'm going to do both ways. First way is to point to this worksheet that you want to copy. In this example, it doesn't matter which one I copy. I'm going to grab that one and then hold the Control key down, and notice that my mouse pointer now has a little plus sign on it, and as I move it, the little triangle says this is where it's going to drop, and for some reason it disappears on my yellow ones, but it would still work. What you can't do, however, is drop it into the first position. So let me drop it here just to show you. Okay, there's my new worksheet. It has a different name called January 2, but that's not really what I want, so I'm going to delete it. And I want to take January and copy it. Trouble here. There we go. Copy it to the beginning. But it won't let me do that. If you want to copy something and move it to the beginning, there is another way to do this, and that's to right-click the sheet that you want to copy. By the way, you can copy multiple sheets all at the same time, and move or copy it using the menu. I want to create a copy, and notice this says it's going to insert it before my January sheet. So you can insert a sheet, but you have to use the right-click copy to get it at the very beginning. Anyplace else, you can just Control, drag, and drop to make a copy. Now I want to rename that. This is going to be my summary sheet. Because I have a formula here that grabs the sheet name from the file name, that automatically updated, so that's handy. Okay? And notice that this in my worksheet was also linked there. This, by the way, is another thing I want to mention real quick. We didn't do this charting in the first recording because I discovered that when you create a chart, and when I copied all this data, the charts that we created used absolute references to point back to the original chart, and so every chart was identical. It was identical to January, so there was no good way to do that. By Control copying this thing, Control dragging it, I got an exact copy of the chart, but without the absolute references to the other worksheet. So copying lets you do a few things that you can't do by just simply grouping. If that confused you, just ignore it. It's not terribly important. Okay, what else do we want to do here? First thing I want to do is say that this is my summary for 2013, so I'm going to add that here. And we'll format it in a second. And now I could have grouped all of these and entered 2013 across the board. But when I make my next 2014 worksheet, I want them all to update, and I don't want to have to necessarily group, so I'm going to show you a different technique. I'm going to select January through December, so I'm shift-clicking December, that's grouped all of them. And now I'm going to put a formula here that says make this cell exactly the same as G2 in the summary worksheet. So I'm now going to do our first formula that refers to a value that's in a different sheet. As always, when you start formulas, you start with an equal sign. And as I normally do, I will use the mouse to go find the cell that I want to use. So I'm going to click on Summary. And there's my G2 cell. I'm going to click on it, and notice the formula gets created. When you create, I call these 3D formulas. I picture all of these worksheets stacked on top of each other. Instead of rows and columns X and Y, I'm now creating formulas that are up and down. Instead of left and right, they're going through the worksheets in kind of a 3D way. And the formula says, take whatever's in the summary worksheet and give me G2. And that's all I need. Press enter. And then I click on one of these. I'm in January. Notice it says 2013. Go to August. It says 2013. But it's really referring back to G2. The nice thing about this, and you'll see this in a future recording, is when I update the summary and say 2014 here, all the others are referring to this cell, so they automatically update. So again, the formula starts with the worksheet name, then an exclamation mark. That's just the rules in Excel for separating a worksheet name from a cell address. This says, get me from the summary worksheet whatever's in cell G2. Don't need that. Press escape, leaves it alone. Let's put it back. This is 2013. All the worksheets update because of a formula, not because of grouping. So it's kind of a different thought process there. All right, now I want to group all of my worksheets. So I've got summary selected. I'm going to go out to December. And again, this is kind of going back to the first recording. I want all my 2013s formatted the same as this, with the big fancy font and the blue background and all that kind of stuff. So I'm going to use the Format Painter, and I'm going to paint this. And I get a little bit of a side effect. I also get a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 column merge and center. And I'm not sure if I like that, but I'm not going to mess with it now. Because all my worksheets are grouped, they all have that. So here's February 2013, September 2013, and so on. Remember, when all of your worksheets are selected and then you click on a different one to give it focus, when all of them are selected ahead of time, it then ungroups them all. So that's a quick way to ungroup, but only when they're all selected. That only works when they're all selected. That was in the first recording. All right, I'm going to go back to my summary sheet now. In my window here, it's kind of hard to get them all squeezed in there. You can, by the way, change the size of this scroll bar. I'm grabbing the edge of it right there on those dots, and that lets me see more. I don't need that scroll bar very much. So now I can get all my months on the screen at the same time and not have to scroll back and forth between them. You can shrink the size of this scroll bar so it doesn't get in your way. Okay, so I got everything all formatted. It looks nice. Now I want to ungroup. I did that and go back to the summary tag. And I want to delete all of my data here. Right? What I want to find out is, on average, what do I spend every month? And then when I'm making my next budget, I can analyze those and say, you know what, on average, I never made my food budget. So maybe I need to add more money there, take it from someplace else, and I can do some analysis. So I'm going to delete all of this data. I just press the delete key, and now I'm going to calculate the average amount of money I spent on housing through all of the months. This is also going to create a 3D formula where I'm referencing cells and other worksheets, but in this case using a statistic. What you cannot use is any of the auto sum values. These only work within one worksheet. They do not allow you to create automatic or 3D worksheets, so I'm going to have to enter the formula myself. And I'm going to type an equal sign as always, and then AV, and there's my average formula. I'm going to click on it and press tab. Excel automatically capitalizes it for me and adds the parenthesis, and now it's waiting for me to show it where the data is that I want averaged. I want to get the data from here, but across all of the worksheets. Now I could say take this one, add this one, add this one, add this. That gets tedious real quick because we have 12 worksheets here. What's easier is you select the first worksheet, and notice I'm still creating a formula here, and then you shift-click the last worksheet, and it creates a range of sheets. We've seen a range of cells with colons, but here I've created a range of sheets, and then all I have to do is click on any one of them. Here's the actual expenditure, and it says, give me the average of all the C5s from January through December. So let me cancel that, do it one more time. I typed an equal sign. One should be enough. Average, press tab. Then I clicked on January, shift click December, and then click the value that I want. Press enter. Notice there's no parenthesis at the end here. Excel's smart enough to add that for you. And now there's my average, and notice again it says average from January, all the way from January to December. Give me the C5s and give me the average of all of them. Now in this case, kind of hard to tell because we have the same mortgage payment every month, but I can now fill that down and it calculates averages all the way down. Now, one of the things that happened by filling this down, this does not have a border on it, and when I filled it all the way down to C16, I lost my border. One of the ways to bring it back is to simply fill without formatting. They use this technique in the book, but they use it, I think, in the wrong place. This is a correct way of doing that, and it says basically don't format these, just copy the formulas. So here's my formula. Because this is a relative reference, this was C5, but it's a relative reference, so it updated to C6, updates this one to C7, but all of them across the worksheets. It's very important that all of your worksheets have basically the same structure. They don't have to match the summary, but each one of these should have the same structure, otherwise creating those 3D formulas is impossible without clicking on each one individually, and that's painful. Got some decimal places here. I don't really want any decimal places, so I'm going to just pull them all out. And notice that this worksheet, this updated. And now I can start doing some analysis of where I'm a little over budget. Fortunately, it's kind of hard to see, so I'm going to take a little detour here. And what I'm going to suggest is that we go through these and we create a conditional format. And a better way to do this is do the first one. I'm going to select the first one. I'm going to enter a conditional format. I'm going to look for highlighting rules because I want to highlight this if it's bigger than that. Greater than, can I use that? No, because I can't make a cell reference. I can only make a value reference. So that's not what I want. So let's try conditional formatting, highlight less than, between, text contains, dates, nope, none of them. So I'm going to try some more rules. And down here at the bottom is use a formula. That's the one I want. So here's the formula. I want to say if this is greater than that. So if this value is greater than that one, and what I hope to do is then copy that down for all of these, but if I copy it, they're all going to say C5, B5, because it's an absolute reference. It's done by conditional formatting automatically. I don't want that. So for my B5, I'm going to press the magic key, F4, 1, 2, 3 times until all the absolute references are gone. Then I'm going to click in C5, 1, 2, 3 until all the references are gone. And now whenever I copy this, it'll update those formulas like it does with relative referencing. I'm going to use kind of an off orange color here to highlight the ones that are different. So let's do that one. Click on OK. And nothing happens. Why not? Well, I've only assigned the conditional formatting of this one, and this is not bigger than that. It's exactly the same. But if I copy this down now, it will highlight the ones that are bigger, helping me do my analysis because this is bigger, this is bigger, this is bigger. This is only a little bigger. This is quite a bit bigger. Food, gasoline, quite a bit bigger. Must have taken some trips. And now I can start doing some analysis and deciding where I want to add things to my budget and how I want to modify it for the year 2014. All right, so that's an example of using average in 3D formulas. And actually, the book never does that. The book only does sums, but you can use any of the formulas to create 3D references to calculate values. Again, the structure of your worksheets is important. So just as another example, let's do the sums and we can see how much we spend. Make a little bit of room here by moving my chart over. I'm going to copy my titles, Control C, Control V. I'm going to change this to the total budget. I'm already tired of erasing ants. Press Escape. This is the total budget. This is the total actual. Those don't look very good because they're wrapping, so I'm going to wrap them within the cell. That's better. And now I want to calculate the sum of all of my budgets and the sum of all the amounts that I spent in this year. So I want sums down here at the bottom. So I'm going to copy this here so I get 2 sums. And I also get the border that's on top. So this sums all of these values. This sums all of those values. And now I'm going to calculate a sum here. I do this exactly the same way I did with the actual format here, with the actual calculation, except instead of sum, I'm going to do an average. Or, I'm sorry, instead of an average, I'm going to do a sum. Equals sum. I just typed all of that. I could have picked it from the list. once again, create a group of cells and click the cell whose values you want to add up. That one. So my overall budget for the year was $16,500 on mortgage. And now I can copy that because it has relative references and all these worksheets have the same kind of layout. I can copy that. So I'm going to copy it. What you cannot do in Excel is copy it sideways and down at the same time. You can only do one. So I'm going to copy it sideways. I actually spent $16,500. That's expected. And now I can take both of them and copy them down. And here's my $2,400 budgeted for utilities. Actually spent $25, $72 for food. Actually spent $78.50, and so on. There's some sums. Now we're about done. But one of the things to be careful of is what happens if you decide that the order of these is wrong. Now in this case that doesn't make a lot of sense because we've got these in month orders, but what happens if I move, notice my total is $16,500. What happens if I move February before January? So what? Everything seems to work fine. However, if you look at the summary, it's not $16,500 anymore. If you look at the formula, it says everything from January through December. January through December does not include February. The point here is not to put your months in the right order. The point is if you have 3D formulas, be careful if you start moving your sheets around. The best idea is to look at all your 3D formulas after you've done that and make sure they still work. Now I put it back, and everything should be back to normal. It is. Finally, these are 3D formulas. They're like any other formulas. If we change any values in the underlying values, so let's say that in January I mistyped that and actually tithed $150. Actually, before I do that, press escape. Let's go look at the tithe values. 110 average, 1325 actual. I'm going to bump the tithe up by $100, so I expect that to change by a few dollars, and I expect this to change to $14.25. 3D formulas are just like other formulas. If the underlying data changes, my average went up, and so did my total. So nothing to worry about there. It actually works the way you expect it to. So that's how you create 3D formulas. One last time, you start with an equal sign, and then start clicking on values. If you need a whole range of values, click one, shift click the other, press enter to create a formula.